The sanctuary lights dimmed as the final Amen echoed through the stained glass dome above Greater Rebirth Baptist Church. Sunday service had ended, and Sister Lila Washington remained seated on the edge of her pew, fingers clutched tight around her handbag, heart tapping too fast for comfort. People passed her by with warm hugs and soft God bless yous, unaware that Lila was studying every single one of them, especially him. Pastor Darnell Gates stood at the altar, charismatic and newly appointed, in his grey-tailored suit and silk pocket square, flashing that camera-ready smile he wore like armor. But Lila didn't trust a man who smiled that much. "Come on, Auntie." Her 16-year-old niece Kendra tugged her elbow. "I want to go greet Pastor before the line gets long." Lila didn't move. "No need for that today." Kendra rolled her eyes. "You always act weird when he's around." That wasn't fair, and it wasn't wrong. Something about the pastor didn't sit right with Lila, not since the first Sunday he'd arrived, sliding into their community from Atlanta like a man with no past. He claimed he had a calling, but when Lila looked at him, she didn't see God. She saw a man too smooth to be honest, too charming to be clean, and worse since he came. 3 young girls, from the youth ministry had stopped attending services altogether. The excuses varied. Moved away, family emergency, private schooling. But the stories didn't line up, and nobody seemed eager to follow up. No photos, no goodbyes, just gone. Lila rose slowly, her knees stiff. "Let's get home. Your mama's waiting." Kendra gave one last look toward the pulpit, where Pastor Gates was shaking hands and laughing with the deacons, and sighed. "I don't know why you don't like him. Everybody else does." "That's the part that worries me," Lila murmured under her breath. Later that evening, as the cicadas hummed in the humid Mississippi air and gospel radio murmured faintly from her kitchen, Lila sat by the window with a notebook in her lap. She wasn't crazy. She knew that much. She had dates, patterns, whispers. She remembered which families suddenly moved, which girls vanished after choir camp, and she'd written it all down. Her therapist used to call it externalizing anxiety. But this wasn't anxiety. This was a pattern. She flipped to a marked page. June 12th. Youth trip to Savannah. 3 vans, 24 kids. By July 1st, Tasha Rollins never returned. Mother won't talk about it. Another entry. August 9th, Vanessa Brinks, age 15, volunteered in pastor's office on Tuesdays. Missing. Police say runaway, but she left her inhaler in the pew. And the most recent circled twice in red ink. Sani Kendra accepted retreat invitation. October 3rd to 7th, led by Pastor Gates. That was next week. Monday morning, Lila went to work, like always, filing claims at a small black-owned insurance office where nobody talked much unless it was about sports or the heat. But at lunch, instead of eating, she drove to the county records office. "Excuse me," she said to the clerk, "do you have birth certificates for Darnell Jeremiah Gates?" The young clerk gave her a raised brow. "You mean the pastor on TV? He was just on Channel 9 last night giving a prayer." "Exactly," Lila said, steady. "I need to confirm something. It's important." The clerk checked the digital index. "We don't got anyone by that full name born in Jackson. No Gates, no Darnell Jeremiah. Only closest we got is a Darnell Julius. Gates, born 1963. But that man died in 1999. You sure you got the name right?" Lila's heart slowed like a cold hand gripped it. She scribbled the information in her notebook and left quickly. Back in her car, she pulled out the church newsletter. Pastor Gates had told the congregation he was born and raised in Jackson, son of a local pastor. Lila stared at the flyer. So who the hell was preaching every Sunday? That night, she stayed up until 2 a.m., poring over sermon clips, church Facebook posts, even the pastor's welcome video. She paused it frame by frame. And then she saw it, in the reflection of the glass cabinet behind him. Tucked in the back of his office during a virtual Bible study livestream, there was a stack of folders labeled R2 and trip logs. Government-style lettering, not church files. And just beside that, a silver emblem she couldn't quite make out. Lila froze the screen and took a photo. Her hand trembled. She texted her sister, "Please don't let Kendra go on that trip. I think something's wrong, something real wrong. I'll explain later." The reply never came, because by morning, Kendra was already gone. Pastor Gates had picked her up himself, and no one at church found that strange except Lila. The next morning, Lila Washington didn't go to work. She sat at her kitchen table in a cotton robe, the morning paper untouched, a cold mug of coffee steaming weakly beside her. Her Bible lay open on Psalm 91, but her eyes weren't on the verses. They were locked on her phone screen, rereading the last text she sent her sister. "Please don't let Kendra go on that trip. I think something's wrong, something real wrong. I'll explain later." No reply. She'd called twice. Voicemail. Sent 2 more messages. Still nothing. Lila threw on a dress and drove across town to her sister Brenda's place, a worn yellow shotgun house with faded flower pots on the steps. No car in the driveway. She knocked hard. No answer. Just the hum of the neighbor's AC and a dog barking down the block. She peeked through the window. No movement inside. Then her phone buzzed. "Brenda." "They already left, Lila. She's with the church. Don't blow this out of proportion. You always do." Lila's stomach dropped. She dialed her sister immediately, straight to voicemail. Then another text followed. "Please don't call again. Kendra needs this retreat. You're stressing everyone out." That was it. Back in her car, Lila gripped the steering wheel and forced herself to breathe. She stared down at her phone like it had betrayed her. "You always do." Those 3 words felt like a slap. Her whole life, Lila had been told she worried too much, overthought, saw things that weren't there. Since childhood, since therapy, since that one time in 2006 when she accused a former choir director of watching the girls too close, and nobody believed her. She remembered the whispers, "That poor Washington girl, nerves ain't right since the miscarriage." But this wasn't about nerves. This was about Kendra, about truth. And she wasn't letting her niece become another missing name in her notebook. That afternoon, Lila drove to Greater Rebirth Baptist again, even though it was Tuesday, and the lot was nearly empty. The office door was cracked open. She stepped inside. Deacon Hughes sat behind the front desk with his reading glasses halfway down his nose. Late 60s, slow-moving, always friendly but distant. He looked up and smiled. "Sister Washington, you lost? I need to speak with Pastor Gates. He's out of town. Took the youth group to the retreat center near Granada Lake." "For how long?" 4 days, I believe. Back Friday." She hesitated. "You got a contact number for the site?" Deacon Hughes chuckled softly. "Nah, sister. It's one of them no-phone retreats. Tech-free. Real spiritual bonding type thing. Pastor said it's what the kids need." Lila pressed. "Where exactly is it?" "Up north by the state line, but I can't recall the name. Some cabin property a friend of his owns." That made her flinch. "A friend of his? Do you have the trip roster?" she asked. He raised a brow. "You trying to volunteer for next time?" She smiled tightly. "I just want to know who went." The deacon looked uneasy. "That's confidential. Parental permission forms, insurance, you know." Lila nodded. "I understand." But inside something twisted. Why wouldn't the church share the list of kids, especially with a concerned family member? That night, Lila did something she hadn't done in over a decade. She reached into the back of her bedroom closet and pulled out an old shoebox with a rusted tin clasp. Inside, a pocket recorder, 3 labeled flash drives, a disposable camera, and a thumb-sized badge from when she interned at the County Juvenile Services office years ago, before she had to leave because of what she imagined about her supervisor and a girl's missing case file. Lila hadn't imagined it then, and she wasn't imagining anything now. She took the disposable camera and tossed it in her purse, tucked the recorder into her coat pocket. It was time to find that retreat site herself. She started by searching cabins and private retreats near Grenada Lake. Most had websites, reviews, photos, all but one. Woodvine Reserve, private Christian youth cabin. No reviews, no phone number, just a contact form and one blurry satellite image of a gravel road in the woods. But that satellite image showed something strange. In the lower right corner, barely visible, a grey van with the Greater Rebirth Church logo. By Wednesday morning, Lila was on the road. She didn't tell Brenda, didn't post anything online. She just filled up the tank, packed snacks, and brought a flashlight, her camera, and her voice recorder. As the trees grew taller and the signal bars dropped from her phone, Lila felt that old pit rise in her stomach. But she wasn't afraid. Not anymore. Because if nobody else was going to ask where Kendra was, Lila would. And if the man preaching every Sunday wasn't who he said he was, she'd find out what he was hiding in those woods, even if it meant walking into the dark alone. By the time Lila reached the gravel path off County Road 310, the sun was low, bleeding amber through the pines. Her tires crunched slowly along the narrow road, dust trailing behind her like a ghost. She drove with both hands tight on the wheel, every turn making her question what she'd do if someone stopped her. The entrance wasn't marked, just a wooden post split with rot, a hand-painted sign barely clinging on. Woodvine Reserve, private use. No fence, no guard, just forest. Lila parked her car behind a thicket of tall reeds, far from the path. She turned off the engine and listened, birds chirping, wind rustling leaves, a faint buzz of cicadas. No human voices, no laughter, no kids. She pulled her jacket tighter and began walking. The dirt trail curved deep into the woods, winding through thickets of dogwood and black gum, until she spotted it, a cluster of 4 cabins set in a clearing. 2-story wooden lodges, modern but plain, with stone chimneys and shutters pulled tight. Parked beside them were 2 familiar grey church vans. Her pulse jumped. She crouched behind a tree and pulled out the disposable camera, snapped a photo, then another. From the angle, she could see a fire pit in the middle of the clearing, unlit, a few folding chairs, and one figure, an older man in a black polo shirt, standing near the far cabin with a clipboard. She zoomed in with her phone's camera. It wasn't Pastor Gates. Whoever he wasn't dressed like someone leading a youth retreat. He had an earpiece and moved like someone used to giving orders. She slid her phone back into her coat. Then she heard it. A girl's voice. "Mister, can we call home tonight?" It was faint but clear. Then a sharper male voice replied, "I said no more asking." Lila's stomach turned. She didn't recognize the girl's voice, but it wasn't Kendra. She stayed low, creeping toward the rear side of the cabins, trying to get a clearer view without breaking cover. Behind the cabins was a makeshift structure, a long prefab unit, metal-sided, windowless, with a padlocked door. She'd seen buildings like that before, temporary holding units used in disasters or in juvenile detention overflow. And suddenly, she knew. This wasn't a retreat. She backed away and returned to her car with a sick feeling brewing in her chest. She didn't have proof yet, but this was bigger than she thought. Lila reached into her glove compartment, grabbed the pocket recorder and clicked it on. She took a steady breath. Wednesday, 6:42 p.m. I'm at Woodvine Reserve off 310. There are 4 cabins, 2 church vans, a metal unit in the back with a lock. I heard a girl ask to call home. She was denied. Then she added, I believe Pastor Gates is involved in holding these girls without contact, possibly trafficking. I am gathering proof. She clicked it off. She needed help, but not from the local police. They were close with the church. Some even attended Greater Rebirth. If she went to them now, they'd say she was spiraling again, or worse, warn the pastor. No, she had to move smart. Back in Jackson, she stopped at a local diner with free Wi-Fi. She ordered coffee and opened her laptop. The satellite images weren't enough. She needed names, records, connections. She searched the phrase, Woodvine Reserve LLC. Only one hit, a property deed registered 2 years ago. The listed manager. Jericho Levan. No phone number, no address. She dug deeper, found an old LinkedIn profile, barely used. Former contract security consultant, previous employer, Evercom Correctional Logistics. Her blood ran cold. Evercom handled private prison transport. Lila shut the laptop as a chill ran through her. It was connected. This wasn't just a shady youth retreat, it was a pipeline. Maybe unofficial, maybe off books, but real. She scribbled the name Jericho Levan in her notebook, and under it she wrote, Find out who funds this, who looks the other way, who's on that trip list. Her hands were trembling when she picked up her coffee cup. At the counter, a man in a leather vest watched her, just a beat too long. She stared back. He stood up, walked out, and she noticed the patch on the back of his vest. Redeemer Watch, Jackson County. A church-affiliated neighborhood group, the kind that handled internal concerns. Her heart sank. She grabbed her keys and rushed out. Her tires skidded as she pulled into the night, adrenaline buzzing. Someone knew she was looking. Back at home, the porch light was out. She unlocked her front door cautiously, slipped inside and bolted it behind her. Every creak of the wood floor made her jump. Then, a rustle from the hallway. She froze. Hello? No answer. She stepped forward, holding her phone up like a weapon. Her bedroom door was cracked open. She always left it closed. She pushed it slowly, the hinges whining. And then she saw it. Her notebook was gone. The one with the entries, the names, the maps, all her notes. In its place, a single photo of Kendra, in a white dress, smiling, standing behind Pastor Gates at what looked like a church picnic. On the back, written in neat block letters, She's safe. Stop digging. Lila's breath caught, but her fear turned into fire. She clenched the photo in her hand, because now she knew the truth. They were watching, and that meant they were scared. The next morning, Lila drove her niece's favorite route to school with a blanket over the passenger seat and a prayer in her throat. The streets looked the same. The community center's mural still bore Dr. King's face. The corner store still had old men sipping coffee out front. But for Lila Washington, everything had changed. Kendra's photo lay in her lap, the back of it screaming louder than the front. She's safe, stop digging. She'd hardly slept, kept the lights on all night, phone pressed against her chest, recorder in hand like a weapon. No calls, no texts, no noises except the deep ache of memory. When Lila was 19, something similar had happened, just less organized. A girl from her choir group, Nariah, had gone missing. They found her months later, bruised, silent, changed. No one was ever arrested. The case was misfiled, and church elders said she had fallen into sin. But Lila had remembered. She always remembered. This time she had the skills, the receipts, the rage. Her next stop wasn't the police. It was Miss Clara, retired librarian and neighborhood record keeper. Clara lived 3 blocks down in a white house with a chain-link fence and a porch full of potted mint and hydrangea. Her mind was sharp, and she knew everybody's business, especially the kind of business people thought they buried. Lila rang the bell 3 times. Clara opened the door with her headscarf still tied and her glasses crooked. "Lila Washington, either you're here to confess or to blow something wide open." Lila exhaled. "Both." Inside, Clara poured tea and pulled out a weathered laptop held together with duct tape and gospel stickers. "You remember a man named Jericho Levan?" Lila asked. Clara leaned back slowly, blinking behind her lenses. "Girl, I haven't heard that name in a decade," she sipped. "Used to run a foster transport program. Quiet under contract. Got into some mess when a kid turned up dead on the ride to Baton Rouge. Nobody could prove anything. But the boy's mama claimed Jericho rerouted the trip to stop at a church in Alabama." "A church?" Lila asked. Clara nodded. "Same network Greater Rebirth belongs to, Southern Fellowship Renewal. They don't just exchange pastors, they exchange favors." Lila felt the pieces grinding together. Then Clara added, "Back then they kept handwritten ledgers. Real old school. I know because my cousin's husband was on one of their boards. He had a stash of church donation records and route logs he was supposed to burn." Lila blinked. "You think any still exist?" Clara stood. She moved to the hallway, pulled down a wooden box from a high shelf and set it on the table. "Girl, I don't throw away receipts, not when men in suits ask too many questions about little girls." The box smelled like thyme, dust and cedar. Inside were folders of yellowing paper, church events, food pantry logs, but also retreat rosters, van sign-out sheets, donation slips and scribbled initials. Lila's fingers shook as she flipped through them. Then she found it. A form marked Woodvine Reserve, Spring Roster 2023, 23 names, all between 13 and 17, and among them, K. Holloway, 16, choir youth leader, parent, B. Holloway, her niece, in Clara's living room, in black ink. Her throat tightened. "I need to make copies," Lila said. "You think I let people borrow my gospel and give it back bent?" Clara chuckled. "Take it. Just be careful. They don't like being exposed." Lila stopped by a print shop on Capitol Street, had them scanned and saved to 3 separate flash drives. One went into her purse, one into a P.O. box safe she still paid for but never used, one she planned to mail. But first, she needed more proof. She needed eyes on the retreat, and not just hers. She pulled into Ty's Auto and Detail, a local garage run by Tyrell James, former IT tech, ex-paralee, and amateur drone flyer. They'd gone to school together. Once kissed behind a snack machine in 8th grade. Since then, he'd rebuilt his whole life with elbow grease and trust from people like Lila. He looked up from under a lifted Impala and grinned. "Lila Washington, either you need a battery or you found another conspiracy." "Both," she said, handing him the photo of Kendra. His face dropped. "Damn, that's real?" "Too real. I need a drone, high quality, quiet, with recording." "You go and spy on church folks. I'm going to spy on whoever's pretending to be church folks." He whistled low. "Gimme 2 hours. You're lucky I just installed silent rotors on my Mavic. Been testing it on pothole reports." That evening, as the golden hour sunk behind the trees, Lila stood again at the edge of Woodvine Reserve. This time she wasn't alone. Ty's drone zipped quietly above the trees, hidden in the fading light. The feed streamed straight to her phone. They watched together in silence from her car parked off the road. The cabins were lit. Through the zoom lens, they could see girls seated in folding chairs around a chalkboard. No retreat vibes, no games, just silence and supervision. 2 armed men walked perimeter. One woman, maybe mid-30s, hair pulled into a hard bun, wrote something on the board. "Obedience is the key to purpose." Lila hit record. Ty leaned forward. "This don't feel like church." "No," she whispered. "It feels like control." Then they saw her. Kendra, hair braided tight, wearing a plain beige hoodie, sitting up straight, her hands in her lap, her eyes blank. Ty whispered, "That's your niece." Lila pressed a trembling hand to her mouth. It was her. It was really her. And in that moment, something inside Lila broke open. Not in fear, but in clarity. They weren't hiding anymore, which meant they thought no one would dare come for them. The next morning, a cold fog hugged the woods outside Woodvine Reserve. It clung low and quiet, the kind of mist that made footsteps feel louder, secrets feel heavier. Lila Washington didn't sleep. She sat in her car, parked behind the same reeds, watching the live stream from Ty's drone, now orbiting on a slow pattern every 15 minutes. Kendra was still there, still silent, still dressed like a ghost of herself. Lila's breath fogged the window as she whispered, "Hold on, baby, just a little longer." She had proof now, video, rosters, a name nobody had seen in years. But evidence wasn't protection. Evidence didn't knock on doors with search warrants. Evidence only mattered when someone powerful cared, and so far nobody did, except her. She drove back to town, her fingers drumming against the steering wheel. A plan slowly forming, one made from old instincts, borrowed courage, and a mother's grief that had never healed. She didn't need the local police. She needed someone who owed her, someone who remembered what happened back in 2006 when Naraya had disappeared and Lila had tried to make noise, and that someone was Detective Eldred Sims, now retired, but once a veteran with the Jackson PD. He lived in an aging red-brick duplex on Buchanan Street. Lila hadn't seen him in years, not since he testified against her allegations and said in court that she was unreliable due to personal grief. But that was before the girl was found, before the files were sealed. She rang the bell. After a long minute, he opened the door in sweatpants and a t-shirt. Bald now, still had that weary, guilt-stained face. "Lila," he said, voice a gravel whisper. She didn't flinch. "You got time to fix something you helped bury?" Inside, the air smelled like old tobacco and regret. He poured himself coffee, added whiskey without asking, and listened while Lila laid it out, step by step. The fake name, the retreat, the missing girls, Kendra, the drone footage, the records Clara saved. When she was done, he sat in silence. Then, "You recorded all this?" She slid a flash drive across his table. He looked at it like it was a confession written in blood. "You know what this means, right? This ain't just a pervert with a title. This is organized, military style. This ain't gonna get fixed with one call." "I don't need it fixed in one call," she said. "I need someone else to believe me, this time." He nodded slowly. "I still got a friend in the AG's office. She handles trafficking leads off the books, quiet. If it's real, she'll move. But Lila, once this gets reported, they'll know someone's watching. It won't be safe for you." Lila straightened. "It ain't been safe for Kendra since last week." That shut him up. 2 hours later, Sims made the call. Her name was Agent Rosalind DeWitt, and she didn't ask many questions. She only requested the files, the video, and the coordinates. "I'll call you by morning," she said flatly. "Don't talk to anyone else. Don't post. Don't move." Lila wanted to ask if she was FBI. She didn't. She already knew from Sims's face that this woman moved in the type of corridors that had no windows. That night, Lila returned home to find her mailbox hanging open. Inside, another envelope. No return address. Inside, a church bulletin. This Sunday's edition. Pastor Gates smiling on the front page. Next to him, Kendra, labeled as Youth Testimony Guest Speaker, 11 a.m. service. Lila's knees buckled. She sat on the porch, hands trembling. Rage and fear clawed their way through her ribs. Why would he bring Kendra back? Why put her in front of everyone? Unless he wanted to prove a point or show control, or use her as bait. Sunday came like thunder. Lila didn't attend service. She watched from a parked car across the street with binoculars and her recorder ready. The lot was packed. Church hats, shine shoes, kids in Easter pastels even though it was October. Then, just after 11:32 a.m., she saw them. Pastor Gates, Kendra, and a woman in a grey dress holding her arm. They stepped onto the stage. Applause. Kendra spoke into the mic. Lila couldn't hear the words from outside, but she could see her niece's mouth forming polite syllables. She could also see the blankness in her eyes, the stiffness in her shoulders. It wasn't her voice. It was a script. And then it happened. Kendra paused. Her eyes swept the crowd. Then, without moving her head, she looked directly at the stained glass window in the back, at Lila's car, and for a second, just a second, her face broke. She blinked twice, pressed her lips together, then looked away. Lila gripped the steering wheel. She recognized it. It was a signal. That night, the phone rang. Not her cell phone. The landline. The one she hadn't used in years. The one only 2 people ever had. She answered slowly. A female voice whispered, "They're moving the girls tomorrow. Midnight. East truck route. Heading south. You didn't hear this from me." Then the line went dead. Lila stood in the center of her living room, shaking. Everything was happening faster than she could control. They were trying to vanish. With Kendra, with all of them. And Lila had less than 24 hours to stop them. The sun dipped low behind Jackson's skyline, painting the clouds with streaks of burnt orange. Lila stood at her bedroom window, watching shadows stretch across the sidewalk. Her mind buzzed with only one fact: midnight, east truck route, southbound. That was the clock ticking, the fuse burning. She paced. She'd already sent copies of everything, files, footage, the retreat's coordinates, to Agent Rosalind DeWitt's encrypted email. No response yet. She tried Sims again. Voicemail. She was running out of people to call, but not out of courage. She pulled her shoebox back from under the bed, loaded the recorder, checked the camera battery, grabbed her spare car keys and locked the house behind her. As she stepped into the cool night air, she whispered, "Hold on, baby, Auntie's coming." 11:17 p.m. Lila reached the industrial park near the I-55 South interchange. It used to be a textile hub. Now it was mostly storage lots, abandoned warehouses, and unlit truck depots that didn't ask questions after dark. She parked 2 blocks away behind an old plumbing supply building. From there she walked, hood up, bag slung tight across her chest. The air was thick with diesel and silence. Then she saw it. A white semi-truck trailer parked near Bay 9. No markings. Lights off. Cab engine running. 2 men stood by the side door with clipboards. One of them was Jericho Levan, the same man from the retreat, same earpiece, same coiled presence. Lila ducked behind a dumpster and started recording. Her hands trembled, but her instincts didn't. She zoomed in with the camera. They were loading crates, not luggage, not boxes of food. Crates, wooden, sealed, and numbered with black stencils. And then movement. From inside the trailer, a shadow shifted. A girl. Thin hoodie pulled tight, arms folded across her chest. Then another and another. The crates weren't for products, they were cover. They were building a mobile holding unit. Suddenly, a loud clang behind her. Lila turned. Too late. A man grabbed her from behind and slammed her against the dumpster. The camera fell. Her breath whooshed out. "Nosy bitches get buried quick," he hissed. She kicked. Hard. He staggered. She broke free, scrambled for her camera, and ran. Tires screeched behind the loading dock as the semi began to move. She darted across the lot, weaving between concrete blocks, knees scraping pavement, heart pounding like a war drum. She pulled out her phone, dialed 911, but before it could ring, blue lights flooded the yard. 3 unmarked SUVs screeched in, tires smoking, doors flung open. Federal agents in plain jackets swarmed the semi. "Down! Hands on your head!" Gun barrels up, shouts slicing the air. Lila stumbled into the open, hands raised, camera dangling from her wrist. A tall black woman in a charcoal suit rushed toward her, badge around her neck. Agent Rosalind DeWitt. "You're Lila Washington?" Lila nodded, breathless. "They're inside. My niece is in there." DeWitt turned, shouted to the team, "We need medics and trauma responders now." The back of the trailer opened, and there she was, Kendra, blank-faced, blinking under the harsh light. Then her eyes found Lila. "Auntie," she croaked. Lila broke, ran, wrapped her arms around her niece and held her tighter than she ever had in her life. "I got you," she whispered. "I got you. They won't touch you again." 2:04 a.m. Greater Rebirth Baptist Church sat in total darkness. But inside, behind the pulpit, a shadow moved. Pastor Darnell Gates stood over his desk, phone pressed to his ear. He listened, silent, then hung up. He opened a drawer, took out a silver badge, federal, real, then dropped it into a metal box and lit a match. The flame curled high, orange dancing over paper, ink, and secrets. He watched it burn without blinking, then grabbed his keys and slipped into the night. 3:11 a.m. At the Jackson Trauma Center, Lila sat by Kendra's bedside, one hand wrapped around hers, the other holding a cup of black coffee. Kendra had barely spoken, just held on tight. DeWitt entered quietly. "They're recovering 10 girls. 4 of them had been gone for weeks. Some were listed as runaways. Some were never reported missing at all." Lila asked. "And the church?" DeWitt's eyes hardened. "We'll pull every record we can, but they've got layers. This ain't just about Gates, it's bigger, federal level, multiple cities, possibly tied to youth ministries in 5 states. "And him?" Lila asked. "What is he really?" DeWitt paused. "Real name's Marcellus Dade, former contractor, classified ops in the early 2000s, went off-grid in '09, reappeared as Pastor Gates in Georgia, and then Mississippi. No ordination, no theological background, just a network." Lila sat back, her soul heavy. "He played God," she said bitterly, "and people let him." DeWitt nodded. "But you didn't." Later that week, news broke across the state. Mississippi church trafficking ring exposed. Local woman provides key evidence. Photos of the raid blurred out the victims, but not the hero. Lila didn't smile in the picture. She didn't need to. Her eyes said everything. By Sunday morning, the pews at Greater Rebirth Baptist Church were half empty. Not because the congregation didn't know what had happened, but because they did. The news spread like holy fire. People who once praised Pastor Gates for his vision now whispered nervously outside gas stations, checking over their shoulders. Some pretended they never knew him. Others swore they had a bad feeling all along. But no one had spoken up. No one but Lila. At home, Kendra stayed curled on the living room couch, swaddled in a fleece blanket, clutching Lila's old church robe like a teddy bear. She barely spoke, wouldn't eat unless Lila fed her herself. Sometimes she'd flinch at the sound of footsteps. Once she screamed in her sleep when the neighbor's car backfired, but she was alive, and she was home. Lila moved like a sentry, quiet, alert, checking locks twice, unplugging the landline, changing their passwords, rotating the flash drives in new hiding spots. She had watched too many girls get silenced by shame. Kendra would not be one of them. 1 week after the raid, Lila sat in a small glass conference room inside the U.S. Attorney's office in downtown Jackson. Beside her sat Agent Rosalind DeWitt, and across from them, 2 men in grey suits, shoulders tight, expressions unreadable. Department of Justice. Neither had introduced themselves beyond titles. They'd called her in to debrief. They didn't thank her. They asked questions. How did you obtain the roster from the church? What was your relationship to the suspect known as Darnell Gates? Have you spoken to any media outlets or local press? Lila answered them with a cool, even voice. She left out nothing, but also gave them nothing extra. When they tried to push, she pushed back. I did your job. You should be asking yourselves how it got this far. The older suit sighed. Miss Washington, we appreciate your cooperation, but these matters are sensitive. There are federal implications, classified connections, foreign intel leaks. You were a civilian operating outside any jurisdiction. Lila leaned forward. So was he. Silence. Agent DeWitt didn't speak, just watched, jaw tight. After the meeting in the hallway, DeWitt handed Lila a plain manila envelope. Inside, a letter from the DOJ, non-disclosure advisory. No gag order, but a stern recommendation. Silence is in the interest of national security. Lila scoffed. How many more girls you gonna let disappear under the flag of national interest? DeWitt met her eyes. Too many already did, that's why I'm still here. She paused. There are going to be people who want to make this go away quietly. The church will shift blame. The congregation will say they were tricked. Donors will claim ignorance. And the girls? We'll protect them, try to reunite them with families. Some won't talk, some can't. But they'll be safer now. Lila took a breath. That's not enough. DeWitt nodded. Which is why I'm not here to stop you from speaking. She pulled out a business card. No agency logo. Just a name, a number, Whistleblower Network, Southeast Division. Take this, DeWitt said. If you go public, use the right channels. You've already been followed once. Don't underestimate who's still watching. That night, Lila sat alone on her porch. Kendra was inside, finally asleep with the TV on low. She'd smiled, just once, when Lila brought her hot cocoa with extra cinnamon. It felt like a miracle. Outside, crickets chirped beneath the cloudy sky. The street was too quiet. Lila clutched the recorder in her lap, clicked it on. This is Lila Washington, daughter of Hattie Mae Washington, resident of Jackson, Mississippi. And for the record, I was not paranoid. I was right. They just didn't want to believe me. She clicked it off, then opened her laptop, created a new folder titled The Names They Ignored. Inside it, she saved all her files, photos, rosters, videos. Then she attached them to an email and addressed it to 6 places. The Jackson Free Press, a true crime podcast in Atlanta, a civil rights lawyer in Memphis, the local NAACP chapter, an investigative YouTuber she didn't even follow, and that whistleblower contact DeWitt had slipped her quietly. She didn't hit send yet. She just stared, until the weight of it all stopped feeling like fear and started feeling like fire. Meanwhile, in a quiet chapel 3 states away, another pastor stood at a similar pulpit, smiled a similar smile, and greeted the congregation of another sleepy town. Behind him, a young girl in a pink dress sat quietly beside an usher. She didn't speak. She just stared into the stained glass as the man began to preach. Her eyes looked far away, like they were waiting for someone to notice. The email went out on a Thursday morning. It wasn't dramatic. There was no lightning crack, no dramatic gasp, just a quiet ping as the messages scattered across the country. In Jackson, in Atlanta, in Memphis and beyond, inboxes lit up with a headline typed in plain bold letters. They knew they let it happen. Here's the proof. Inside were links, videos, scanned ledgers, Photos of crates and coordinates, drone footage, the camp, the names, the voice of a woman whispering to herself in the dark, saying, "This is real. I'm not imagining this. They are still taking them." By noon, it had already begun. First, the press. The Jackson Free Press dropped a feature within 48 hours. Choir of Silence, one woman's fight against a hidden trafficking network. Then came the podcast episode, an emergency release titled "The Woman Who Watched and Acted." And then the calls, from families who hadn't heard from their daughters, from women who had once been sent on those retreats and came back different, from deacons, choir leaders, secretaries who remembered strange donations and off-hours trips, from survivors, now grown, now angry, now ready to speak. The Department of Justice tried to contain it. Off-the-record denials, threats of legal retaliation, talks of misinterpretation, conspiracy, internet exaggeration. But the genie was out. Lila had mailed physical copies of everything to a courthouse, a reverend in Chicago, and an activist lawyer who never lost a child abuse case. The silence cracked, and once it cracked, it screamed. 3 weeks later, the arrests began. Not just Jericho Levan, but 8 others, across 5 states, all tied to the Southern Fellowship Renewal Network. 2 wore collars. 1 ran a foster agency. 1 was a retired federal marshal. The rest were men and women who just helped out, van drivers, chaperones, prayer group hosts. At least 22 girls were rescued before further relocation. 4 boys, too, all under 18, all from faith-based intervention homes. Some had families, some didn't, but they all had one thing in common. They had not been believed. Until now. In Jackson, the church sign was taken down. Greater Rebirth Baptist would reopen under a new name, new leadership, a new statement of transparency. But Lila never went back inside. She walked past it every now and then on her way to pick up groceries or walk Kendra through the neighborhood, but she never stepped through its doors again. Some sanctuaries, once violated, don't get restored. They become museums of what people chose not to see. Kendra slowly returned to herself. She didn't talk much about what happened, didn't need to. Her quiet spoke volumes. The way she stopped looking over her shoulder, the way she slept through the night, the way she wrote a poem for her English class titled "Things That Don't Belong in a Church." It ended with one line: "A girl's silence should never be the price of someone else's sermon." Lila framed it. Hung it beside the front door. Agent Rosalind DeWitt resigned 3 months later, took a position with a private investigative group that fought trafficking through whistleblower platforms. She and Lila stayed in touch, not often, but when it mattered. Once she sent Lila a note. It read, "They told you to be quiet. Instead, you became a megaphone. Keep going." 1 year later, Lila took the stage at a regional trauma recovery summit. Small room, maybe 40 people, mostly social workers, youth counselors, a few survivors. She didn't speak like a professional. She spoke like a woman who had once been dismissed, mocked, called paranoid, even by her own. She told them what silence costs, what doubt does to a child, what happens when the church chooses image over truth, what it feels like to look your niece in the eyes and say, "I will never let them take you again." When she finished, the room was silent, not empty, just reverent. Then someone stood and began to clap. One by one, the rest followed, not in applause, but in recognition, in grief, in gratitude, and in a small-town church 3 states away, a different congregation sat on edge. Their new pastor had come highly recommended, too highly, no photo online, just charisma and a promise. But in the front row, a woman stood up mid-sermon, took out her phone, recorded the man's face, and walked out. The man paused. His eyes flicked to the usher, and for the first time, he looked afraid. because now there were women like Lila in every city, watching, documenting, speaking. The end dedicated to the ones who weren't believed until they spoke anyway.